Some say it's too long. Some say it's too short. What I'll tell you is the AFL trade period garners more chatter, more buzz, and more hype and hysteria than almost anything across the sporting calendar here in this country. You can go across any sport in the world. The transfer windows of European soccer, whether it be free agency in the NBA, the NFL, Major League Baseball, or the hockey, whatever it is, even the transfer portal in the college sporting ranks, it goes mad. People love trying to be the list manager, be the general manager, be the person who makes their team go from good to great or great to elite. That's what we're here for, the trade period in the AFL. It's an absolute monster. It's an absolute juggernaut, and it's almost finished. My name is JJ. As I said, perhaps in this trade period, we lack a true superstar, if you like, but there's no shortage of headline acts. Some will be moved. Some might need to go back to their clubs with their tail between their legs. But today I want to get across most of the big-time names, the big headline acts, and also a few things as I've been doing AFL Trade Radio with Damien Barrett and Brad Johnson and a little bit of Mark Bickley, some themes that have been just raising their head a little bit, some things that I think can be used in the future, some things clubs can use to gain a little bit more leverage back from the players who are certainly in power in the modern day age of trading. So let's get stuck into a few of those. When I'm sitting down here on a Monday night at almost 8:30, I'm doing so with a sore neck. But secondly, and more importantly, of course, it is 8:30 on a Monday. So most of what you may be watching, some may have happened, some may not have happened, but certainly you'll have more information. So as I sit here on Monday night at 8:30, this is what I know, and this is what I can tell you. I want to start with these themes before we get into the players who may or may not get dealt. Why are clubs extending players on long-term contracts? It's been all the rage, the chatter about long-term deals. Are they bad for the game? Are they bad for clubs? King Khan himself has been on his high horse about them for quite some time. I want to talk about why they're actually a positive from the club's perspective. We've seen Jacob Weitering, we've seen Noah Bolter, we've seen Max King, we've seen countless others sign long-term deals over the past couple of weeks, couple of months, couple of years. I signed a 5-year contract extension way back in the middle to end of 2016, and that was considered a long deal at the time. Now we're seeing 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 on the norm. So why is it perhaps even a good thing for the clubs? We know why it's a good thing for the player, but why is it a good thing for the club? It buys the player out of free agency. So we're seeing clubs come with unbelievable amounts of money for players who are free agents. Harry Perryman reportedly on $900,000. Josh Battle reportedly on a similar amount. We're seeing clubs identify free agents and say, we'll give you $250,000, $300,000 a year more than you might be worth because we don't have to trade for you. You're a free agent. We give up nothing to get you. And the price and the premium that clubs are putting on those guys is through the roof. So you buy a player out of free agency. So Max King's never going to hit free agency. Jacob Weitering the same. So Carlton will never be in a situation where Jacob Weitering is a free agent and he'd be a restricted free agent. And Richmond, for example, could come in and offer him $1.5 million a year, and Carlton just simply can't match it. There's no risk of that because he is contracted for 6 years. So you're not going to get someone, identify him as a free agent and just go, boom, here's a number Carlton can't match. So you're buying good players out of free agency. You're making sure you don't have to deal with that Godfather offer that comes for a free agent that you can't match. It also keeps them from having to cop or be a part of what may happen with the Bailey Smith situation. Again, I'm sitting down on a Monday night, 2 days or 2 nights almost exactly before the trade period. And Bailey Smith may well walk to the draft. The Dogs might in the end accept 17. They might get 17 and something else. But the Dogs feel like they're getting unders no matter what. Now, if he moves himself to the draft, they are getting unders because they're getting nothing. But this is what happens, conversely, to not extending players on long-term deals. This is what can happen when you're trying to trade a player who's out of contract. You've got next to no leverage because the threat or the reality, however you want to look at it, of the player going to the draft and getting to where they want to go for free is there. We know it doesn't happen much, but it's there. The Dogs risk standing on their high horse, proclaiming to the world that they won't be handled and dealt with and bullied by other clubs. So they walk Bailey Smith to the draft. Well, guess what, Dogs fans? What do you get if he walks to the draft? You get nothing. You get nothing. And that's another reason why we're seeing clubs put these guys in contract for a long time. So you don't risk losing a player for nothing or unders or well unders. Now, you're not going to contract every player for a long time because some simply aren't worth it, but so many are. And that's why we're seeing it happen. The other thing, and maybe the least relevant, is you're tying players down most likely at a figure that if they play the way you expect them to play over the course of their 4, 5, 6, 7 years, you probably get them for under market rate in the back half of that deal. So if Jacob Wettering plays to his potential for those 6 years, I've got almost no doubt you're getting him for under market value in the back half of that deal. So there's some reasons why it might actually be beneficial for the clubs to contract these guys long term. Moving on, nominating a destination. This is the other thing that I found really interesting this trade period. Why can't we have players nominate a state instead of a club? I hear the arguments. I want to play in big games. I want to go from Port Adelaide, aka Dan Houston, to Carlton or Collingwood, not North Melbourne. Well, if I'm North Melbourne, this is what I say to Dan Houston. Well, we think you can help us play in big games. You can help take us to Friday night and Thursday night footy. You can be a part of that for us to get us there so that you can play in those big games. I'm just yet to hear, and I've been asking Damo and I've been asking some of the callers and some of the people who work in and on trade radio, what's the counter argument to players only being able to nominate a state or a jurisdiction? Now, if you're moving from Adelaide or Perth or Queensland back to Melbourne and you don't want to go to Geelong, that's fair enough. You want to be in Melbourne, that's fair enough. But there are, 9 clubs in Melbourne? I get this number wrong all the time. There are more than 1 or 2 clubs in Melbourne. So why can't Port Adelaide, in the Dan Houston situation, deal with all the clubs in Melbourne? Why can't clubs who might have a player from Sydney who wants to get back to Melbourne? He's a big-name player. You can only deal him to the club he nominates, not all the clubs in Melbourne to get the best possible capital in return for the player. I'm not sure why. I know at the moment the actual reason why is the players need to sign off on the club. But as we move into a phase where the clubs need and certainly want more leverage and more power in these negotiations, why can't Liam Baker and Shea Bolton nominate Western Australia rather than Fremantle and West Coast in particular? Last time I checked, they're in the same state. They're in the same city. You're going to be doing the same job, playing footy. The money might be the same. I don't understand why we can't get to that space and get to that place where players can only nominate destinations, not specific clubs, because it is restricting a lot of the movement at the moment. There are clubs and players who can't get moved to where they want to go because the club doesn't have the capital to make it happen. And we're restricted with how far down the track we can trade our future picks. So that's potentially why Christian Petrarca doesn't get moved out of Melbourne. There aren't enough future picks accessible to clubs who might be chasing him. So let me know. I'm not sure what you think on that one, but let me know. Leave a comment in the comments section. do you think players should only be allowed to nominate a destination rather than a specific club? And the last one I want to talk, sorry, two more. In fact, it is the last topic before we get stuck into the players who are on the move. Why and how do we assess a trade for a highly paid player? So veterans on big cash or veterans at the back end of big time deals. And there are some in this trade period who fit the bill. Jack McRae, Caleb Daniel, Clayton Oliver, who won't be moved, but he fits the bill. So players who might be in the back half or might have some years remaining on a contract. And then you may see the deal and you think, gee, that doesn't make sense. That's a fair bit to give up for a player of his age and stature. Well, that's not a lot to give up for a player of his age and his stature. Typically, you've got to follow the money. Now, we'll never truly know, but there won't be long until we've got a time where every club in the AFL, all 18 clubs in the AFL, are paying for someone to play for another team. Some call it a salary dump. I think it's a bit more than that. It's a bit more, it's a little bit more specific than that these days. It's not just purely a salary dump where a player is moved so this club can save its cap space. But you have a look at some of these deals. If you see a Jack McRae moved for a pick 30, for example, well, then I think you know that the Dogs who receive pick 30 and you think that's overs, you know that the Dogs are likely paying a fair bit of that salary. Equally, if you see him moved for almost nothing or you slide back only a few picks in the draft, then you know maybe the new club that Jack McRae has gone to is picking up most of that tab. That's a great little telltale sign in terms of these deals when you want to know who's picking up the tab. And we've heard some, Brodie Grundy's been in this scenario. There have been other players along the way, myself included, who have been in this sort of situation where it's been their old club paying some of the bill and the new club paying some of the bill. Because believe it or not, if you sign a contract at your club of origin, 5 years, $5 million, you aren't guaranteed to get that $5 million. You're guaranteed it in some ways, but if you are willing to move and the old club needs to pay some of the contract, what you need to do, you basically rip up your 5 years, $5 million. You need to negotiate a new term and a new contract with your old club and a new term and a new contract with your new club. So your old club might say, well, we'll pay you for 5 years because that's what we owe you, but we'll pay you $400,000 of the $1 million. And then the new club says, well, we'll only pay you $400,000 as well. That's all we can afford. So your decision is, do I go back to the club I don't want to be at and get my 5 years, $5 million? Or do I go to the club I want to be at and get 5 years, $800,000 a year and leave $200,000 a year or $1 million overall on the table? That's a decision you've got to make. And that's why you hear a Clayton Oliver willing to take a pay cut to get to where he wants to go. If he stays, he's not taking a nickel less. He's not taking a dime less. But that's some of the stuff that goes on behind the scenes. And those are some of the telltale signs when you might see a deal for an aging player and you think, gee, that's a strange old trade. Follow the money and it might assist you in terms of working out what's what. Now, let's get stuck into some of these players. Bailey Smith, across the weekend, we learned through the papers that the Dogs were seeking a top 10 pick. We know they're not going to get that. We know they're more likely to get nothing than they are to get a top 10 pick. So we shall see. We shall see. Does Bailey Smith go for 17? Does he go for 17 and a bit more? Or does he go to the draft? That's one that's going to go right down to the wire because both clubs, Geelong feel like they're in the box seat and the Dogs want to stand up for themselves. Clayton Oliver, this deal is not dead in the water. I reckon there's a phone call a day on this one behind the scenes, but it's close enough to dead in the water. The D's have walked back their decision to shop him. They don't want to pay him to play elsewhere, which means Geelong or anyone else would have to stump up 1.4 a year for 6 years. Otherwise, Oliver would have to take a significant short back and sides on that salary, and he shouldn't do that. He shouldn't do that. The Cats have got very little draft capital. They're prioritising Bailey Smith anyhow. So this deal, I reckon, comes up one more time. I think we'll hear about it one more time in a legitimate fashion. But I doubt there's anything genuinely meaty about it. But I guess this time next year, if things aren't improved, expect to hear about it again. Shea Bolton. Now, Bolton and Baker seemed to be scooped up in the same deal. Freo were on the move, offering 10, 11 and 18 to the Tigers for the premiership stars. Bolton's got 3 years to run on a deal. His mind is already in WA. He will get there. He will definitely get there. He's what Fremantle need. He's a match winner. He's a goal scorer. He's got freak talents, freak abilities. Put him in that Dusty Martin striker role with Fremantle, and I think he'll be a force next year. Basically, right off 2024, he was disinterested. They were losing. They were getting beaten. Life was tough for him. Put him at Fremantle, where he's enthused. He's got a new contract, most likely, and they're winning some games, and I think you'll see the best version of Shea Bolton. Where it comes to Liam Baker, he wants to follow Andrew McQualter to the Eagles. The problem is the pick the Eagles expected to land for Tom Barras is now elsewhere. And Liam Baker needed to potentially get his head around a move to Fremantle rather than West Coast, but they tell me this deal will still get done and he will still get to the West Coast Footy Club. I think he will captain that club at some stage. Yes, Oscar Allen's there. I understand. But he looks like a captain or at least a vice captain to me. He plays with heart, courage. He's humble in the way he goes about it. He can play anywhere. He can play half forward, mid, wing, half back. He's incredibly versatile. He'll be a great pickup for the Eagles if they get him. And he'd be a great pickup for Freo if they could pinch him as well. Dan Houston. Everyone keeps telling me they know how good he is, but then everyone balks at the asking price. This is what he is to me. He's a dual All-Australian who is among the best kicks, the most potent kicks in the competition. He's prolific. He's always around 22 to 24, 25 disposals per game. He's got good size. And in my humble, I think he could play as a genuine mid. I think he could. We heard that about Zach Williams way back when, that he was going to go from half-back to mid. Didn't work. Now he's playing as a goal sneak. But I think Houston is a better player than Zach Williams. In fact, I know he is. Now, Carlton have got picks 12 and 14. Yep, they've got to make a play for him. I'd be flat as if I was a Carlton fan. 29 years without a premiership, and we're keen to go to the draft. What for? To wait another 29 years. We've got Curnow, we've got Walsh, we've got Wiedering, we've got Cripps. Let's go and get this thing done. Bring in Dan Houston. Make us better now. Don't make us better in 4 years with a kid who may or may not make it. Collingwood are in the mix. They seem keen on Houston. They seem keener as well on Houston. So he's going to be the big one to follow as we move along. Late on Monday night, it seems like Collingwood have made a move and got themselves in the game for the all-important pick 13, which may unlock the Houston deal. Tom Barras, I mentioned him earlier, and this deal became problematic late last week, when the Hawks just said, well, sayonara, we're trading our 14. We're trading our pick. Good luck to you. But most say the future first and future second that the Hawks did acquire in that pick will do the job quite nicely. And there's nothing to see here for West Coast. Barras will get to the Hawks. But I would give strong consideration. Now, I know this is not the done thing, and he was farewelled at the BNF and this, that, and the other. I would have no problem if I were West Coast in saying, Tommy, come on back. Come on back, big fella. You've played in a premiership. You've been in a leadership group. You've got deep roots in Perth. You're from Claremont. You've got a family here. You're going to be a life member of the club. Come on back. If we don't get what we want for you, you've got 3 years to run on a deal. You're probably paid $700,000-$800,000 a year, and you deserve every penny. Come on back. This is the one I'd really push against if I was West Coast. He's a contracted player. You don't have to give him away. You won't lose him for unders. So unless you get exactly what you want or more, come on back. Jake Stringer. He's a name that's been bubbling around over the past couple of weeks. GWS are the team who seem legitimately keen on the goal kicking forward, but I've got some reservations. He's chasing that 2-year contract, despite the fact he landed and ticked off a trigger with Essendon for a 12-month extension. But if I'm GWS, this is why I'm not keen, or this is why I'm lukewarm on the idea. Whose position will he take? Jesse Hogan and Toby Green speak for themselves, so you can basically discount those two. Jake cannot ruck, so one of Cadman or Riccardi must be in the team because you need a backup ruck. So do you really want Stringer taking Cadman's spot and leaving him vulnerable to opposition attacks next off-season? Callum Brown probably seems the most vulnerable player of those guys, but he's a 24-year-old with immense upside, endless upside in most phases of the game. Jake, we know will kick goals. We know he probably kicks 35 plus next year for whoever he plays for, but he doesn't contribute majorly in other phases of the game. For me, if I'm running GWS, which I'm not, believe it or not, I'm fine with the forward line I've got. The forward line I've got is not the issue. I've got great balance. I've got smalls. I've got pressure players. I've got Coleman medal winning tools. My captain is there in the mix, who I hope to get even more impact from next year. It's a no from me when it comes to the package. They're the main names still to be dealt. As I said, Monday night, 8:43 p.m. Some of those guys will be done and traded by the time you watch this. Some may not. And if you're watching this after the deadline, well, you'll have even more information about why some guys did and did not get dealt. So I'm done. I'm out of here. Some, as I said, look on the path to getting their way, their wish, getting to the club of choice, and some won't. Anyway, either way, thanks for following along. Make sure you do catch the NFL podcast in the audio format. It's available on all podcast platforms. Make sure you follow along on the socials. Make sure you give us a like, a subscribe, and a comment and rating on YouTube and all the other forums. It's, as my great friend Chad Millman says, feedback is a gift. So make sure you give us some feedback. Keep following along as the trade period comes to a close. Group 1 racing continues to fire up. And the NFL each and every weekend goes bonkers. Thanks for watching. My name's JJ, and we'll chat again soon.